No one told me there was another photograph.
It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodor. And it was Lady Hat's birthday. She was having a special party. There were cakes and balloons and even a merry-go-round. But most exciting of all was the brass band. It was coming from the mainland to play at the party. Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth's sheds. "Thomas, you are to collect the brass band." "Thank you, sir," said Thomas. James and Gordon were upset. They wanted to collect the brass band themselves. Thomas puffed happily across the island. And into Knapford Station. The brass band climbed aboard Thomas, and he raced away. For Thomas was so excited, he pulled away too soon. The tuba player was left behind. It was winter. A thick blanket of snow lay over the island of Sodor. All the engines were busy carrying passengers and goods from station to station. Sometimes they need to warn people they are coming. So steam engines blow their whistles. And diesel engines sound their electric horns. One day, Percy took some troublesome trucks to the smelter's yard. He whistled hello to Harry and Bert. But Harry and Bert laughed.
Call that a whistle?
Mocked Bert.
Just listen to this. Diesels can do everything better than steamies,
they sneered. It was cold and snowy on the island of Sodor. The village children had built a snow engine. They were excited. The winter holidays were here. People were coming from far and wide to visit the island. This year, there was even more snow than usual. It covered the island and blocked the roads. Bertie the bus couldn't take any passengers. So Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth's sheds. "Percy, you are to pull the passengers today," said Sir Topham Hatt. Percy was worried. He usually took the mail or shunted freight cars. He hadn't pulled passengers for a long time. "Gordon will show you what to do," said Sir Topham Hatt, and he left. "I'm an express engine," huffed Gordon. "I shouldn't be slowed down by a small engine like Percy." It had been a stormy night on the island of Sodor. Telegraph poles had blown down. Tiles had blown off the station roofs. And branches had fallen onto the lines. All over the island, the storm had made a terrible mess. Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth's sheds. "The storm has caused confusion and delay," he boomed. "So you must all be really useful engines." "I'll be the most useful engine," boasted James.
No, I will,
sniffed Gordon.
I'm the fastest. I'll do the most journeys.
Thomas hoped he could finish his special delivery as quickly as possible. He wanted to do the most journeys and be the most useful engine of all. Soon, all the engines were steaming away from Tidmouth sheds. James went to Knapford Yard to pick up the workmen. Gordon went to the goods yard to collect telegraph poles. Toby trundled to collect new roof tiles. And Thomas steamed over to Marin Station. The island of Sodor is a busy, bustling place. There is always lots for the engines to do. One morning, Thomas was shunting freight cars in the yard when Sir Topham Hatt came to see him. The fishermen are celebrating their biggest catch of fish ever. Thomas, you must help Arthur take the fish to the docks. Thomas was fed up. He didn't like the smell of fish. And when he got to the fishing village, there were lots of freight cars, all stacked full of fish. Thomas had never seen so many fish. Phew, he puffed. What a horrible smell. Then Arthur arrived. Arthur warned Thomas that the route to Brendam Docks was bumpy.
Only take 5 freight cars at a time,
said Arthur.
and go slow and steady.
Toby is a steam tram. He looks very different from the other engines. He is square and his body is made of wood. Toby is not as strong as the other engines, but he always tries his hardest. One morning, Toby was delivering some freight cars of milk. He puffed across the island and up Gordon's Hill. Gordon's Hill was very steep. Toby puffed hard. It was a long climb. Just then, Gordon arrived at the bottom of the hill. But today, the express was heavy, and Gordon had to wait for Edward to help. "Bother," huffed Gordon. Soon, Edward puffed to the rescue. He buffered up behind Gordon. Edward pushed, and Gordon pulled. At last, the express train started to move. Toby had finally reached the top of the hill when Gordon puffed past. "Slow, coach," Gordon huffed. "I'm trying my hardest," gasped Toby. "Pah!" sniffed Gordon. "You're not even a proper engine." This made Toby feel very sad. It was a cool summer's night on the island of Sodor. All of the engines were very busy and there were lots of jobs to do. Gordon pulled the express and Percy took the mail. He delivered letters and parcels across the whole island. Thomas was delivering coal to the coaling plant. It was a very long journey and a very heavy train. Thomas worked all night puffing through the countryside. At last, Thomas had delivered all the coal. He was very tired. "I'm puffed out," said Thomas. "I wish I'd had some help delivering the coal." "Pah!" huffed Gordon. "A really useful engine doesn't need help." Then Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "I need an engine to run 3 special deliveries for me," Sir Topham Hatt said. "I can do it," puffed Thomas. He was tired, but he wanted to prove he was a really useful engine. "Very well, Thomas. You must take some chickens to the market, sheep to the farm, and the children to school." "That's a very big job for a small engine," chuffed Gordon. "You're bound to need some help." This made Thomas cross. "Tank engines don't need help," snapped Thomas. "We're really useful." And he puffed away. It was the end of a busy day. The engines had been working hard. They were feeling pleased and proud. Except Henry. He was feeling ill. "What's the matter with you, Henry?" Thomas asked. "My boiler's grumbling." "Maybe it's grumbling at you," teased Thomas. "That's not funny," hissed Henry. "You just don't care." But Emily saw that Henry was leaving a puddle of water behind. She was worried. The next morning, Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "Thomas, Percy, Henry, I want you to collect some freight cars and take them to the docks." "Yes, sir," cried Thomas and Percy. Henry watched the engines puff away. He didn't feel well. "Useful engines don't complain," Henry muttered. He was leaving water everywhere as he chuffed towards the coaling plant. When Emily saw this, she was more worried than ever. Then Thomas and Percy overtook Henry. "Hurry up, Henry!" Percy tooted. "I can't go any faster," Henry chuffed miserably. "You're just being lazy," teased Thomas. Rheneas and the Dinosaur. Rheneas and SKARLOEY are the best of friends. They love working together. And they enjoy shunting freight cars. They biff them. And they bash them. All day long. That summer, some men from the Sodor Museum had found some very old bones. When they put the bones together, they made the skeleton of a dinosaur. That morning, a photographer arrived on the island to photograph the dinosaur. Thomas was to take him to the transfer yards. At the transfer yards, Mr. Percival was talking to his engines. "The dinosaur will soon be ready to go to the Sodor Museum," Mr. Percival said. "I will need 2 very careful engines to collect it." Rheneas and SKARLOEY were very excited. "We can be really careful," puffed Rheneas. "Watch." Thomas and the new engine. The trains on the island of Sodor keep very busy. There are always lots of jobs to do. One morning, Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth Sheds. "A new engine has arrived on the island," he announced. "His name is Neville. You must all make him feel welcome. A happy engine is a useful engine." Later, Thomas was stopped at a signal. The signalman called down to Thomas. "The bridge ahead is unsafe. Thomas, you ought to collect a piece of ironwork so the bridge can be repaired." "Yes, sir," huffed Thomas. At the yards, Harry and Bert were with Neville, the new engine. Neville was a steamy, but he had a square body like a diesel. Neville was backing up towards some trucks. "Nearly there," said Harry cheekily. "Nearly there," said Bert naughtily. Then there was trouble. "Watch where you're going, clumsy wheels," Harry and Bert laughed. Neville looked sad. "It's not our fault if you're a silly steamy," oiled Bert.
and they laughed even harder. The magic lamp. Narrow gauge engines work very hard. They puff and chuff all day, up and down the hills. One day, the winding gear that carried coal cars up and down the incline broke. The engines had to work extra hard, pulling heavy coal cars up and down the long, steep track, until at the end of the day, they could ease their aching axles. That evening, Thomas puffed into the transfer yards. All the narrow gauge engines were there. Thomas was delivering steel winches and wires to repair the broken incline. "Listen, Thomas," hooted Rusty. "SKARLOEY's telling us a story from the hills." "Long, long ago," began SKARLOEY, "there was an old engine called Proteus. His lamp was so bright, you could see it for miles around. Proteus said it was a magic lamp. He promised that if any engine ever found the lamp, their wishes would come true." "How would you know it was Proteus's lamp?" asked Duncan. Thomas's day off. The engines on the island of Sodor were always very busy. They liked being busy. And no engine liked being busy more than Thomas. But sometimes, Thomas also liked to have a day off. One autumn morning, Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth Sheds. He had important news.
A new diesel engine has arrived on the island, he boomed. His name is Dennis. You must all help him to get to know the Sodor Railway. And Thomas, added Sir Topham Hatt, you have been working very hard. Today, you can have a day off.
Thomas was very pleased. "First, I will have a long washdown," Thomas chuffed cheerfully. "Then I shall go to Bluff's Cove." On his way to the washdown, Thomas saw a diesel he had never seen before. The diesel was huffing and puffing. "Hello," Thomas tooted. Flower power. It was Halloween night on the island of Sodor. The moon shone brightly, and the stars twinkled in the night sky. The children's Halloween party was over. But while the children slept, all the engines were kept very busy. Thomas was alone at Tidmouth Sheds when Sir Topham Hatt arrived. He was still in his Halloween costume.
You are to collect flour from the mill and take it to the bakery, he boomed. You must work with diesel. The island needs its morning toast, and Lady Hatt and I need our English muffins, he added sternly. So I'll have no mishaps tonight.
Thomas didn't want to work with diesel, but he wanted to be really useful. When Thomas arrived at Brendam, he couldn't see Diesel at all. Diesel was up to his old tricks. He rolled up behind Thomas and went, "Boo! Ah!"
Trust the silly old Steamy to be scared on Halloween,
Diesel sneered. "I'm not a scared engine," said Thomas firmly. Thomas and the Storyteller. It was an important day on the island of Sodor. A new library was going to be opened. Everyone was excited. There was going to be a ceremony with a brass band, a red carpet, and boxes of books. All the children and all the grown-ups loved reading books and listening to stories. A famous storyteller was going to tell the children a special story. All the engines wanted to collect the famous storyteller, but Sir Topham Hatt chose Thomas. Thomas was excited.
You must show the famous storyteller the special sights of Sodor, he boomed. Then she can make up a special story for the children. Make sure she arrives at the grand opening on time.
Yes, sir, tooted Thomas excitedly. I know all the best sights. Thomas puffed over to Brendam Docks. He wanted to do a good job. Thomas arrived at the docks. He looked up and down, left and right, and all around, looking for someone famous. But all he could see was a lady with a notepad and a big box of cookies. Are you the famous storyteller? Thomas asked. I like to think so, said the lady. You must be Thomas the Tank Engine. Will you please show me the sights of Sodor? Of course, tooted Thomas happily. So the famous storyteller hopped on Thomas's footplate, and Thomas puffed away. Emily and the Garbage. Emily is a grand green engine. She's very proud of her big wheels and her perfect polished paintwork. One morning, Emily was very excited. Sir Topham Hatt had told her to work with a new engine. I hope he's smart and useful, she wished. Emily met Thomas waiting at a signal. The new engine is waiting for you at the shunting yards, tooted Thomas. I can't wait to meet him, puffed Emily, and she chuffed away as fast as her boiler could bubble. Emily steamed into the shunting yards to look for the new engine. He was the dirtiest little engine she had ever seen. Hello, Emily, wished the new engine happily. My name's Whiff, because I'm a bit smelly. You're going to help me collect garbage. Emily was horrified. Oh, come on then, she sighed. Let's get started. Gordon was talking to James and Henry in a siding. When they saw Emily with Whiff, they laughed. Hello, whistled Whiff. Who's your smelly new friend with the funny whistle, Emily, snorted James. Hector the Horrid. Thomas the Tank Engine enjoys shunting troublesome trucks. He can biff them harder and faster than any other engine. It's one of his favorite jobs. One morning, Sir Topham Hatt had an important announcement. James and Edward must make extra deliveries of coal, he boomed. Thomas, you must shunt and fill freight cars at the coaling plant. James and Edward, you must collect them this afternoon. Thomas was very pleased. Just then, Bill and Ben chuffed by. Between them was a big black truck. It was biffing and bashing the little engines. What are you two doing, tooted Thomas? Bill and Ben told him they were delivering the truck to the coaling plant. Why does it need two engines to deliver one truck? Asked Thomas. Because he really doesn't like to be shunted, chuffed Ben. His name is Hector, huffed Bill, but we call him Hector the Horrid. Bill and Ben shoved slowly away with Hector. He does look troublesome, huffed James. Troublesome trucks don't worry me, boasted Thomas. I could biff him firmly into place. Toby's Triumph. It was a beautiful autumn day on the island of Sodor. It was time for the Harvest Festival. All the engines were busy. They puffed across the island with their Harvest Festival deliveries. Sir Topham Hatt came to Tidmouth with news of an exciting special. Alicia Botti was arriving to give an open-air concert at the picnic fields.
Toby and Henrietta, you are to collect Alicia Botti and take her from the airport to the picnic. Remember, Toby, boomed Sir Topham Hatt, Miss Botti is a very special passenger. I am relying on you to do a very good job.
Thomas and Percy were excited for their friend, but Toby wasn't excited.
I've never taken a very special passenger before, he wished.
You take passengers all the time, tooted Thomas.
But not very special ones, said Toby. I'm worried I'll make a mistake.
As he and Henrietta were cleaned and polished, Toby was still worrying. And later, when the refreshments lady laid out a very special tea, Toby worried even more. Thomas and the runaway car. It was a beautiful day on the island of Sodor. Thomas was feeling especially happy. He was on his way to Brendam Docks to collect a special. It was the day of the Sodor show. Sir Topham Hatt's brand new car was being unloaded. It was in Lady Hatt's favorite color, hat blue. Sir Topham Hatt had chosen Thomas to take the car from the docks to the Sodor show. Thomas was so proud, he thought his boiler would burst. Rocky was slowly lowering the car onto a flatbed. All the engines wanted this job, Thomas puffed proudly.
Sir Topham Hatt chose me to take the brand new bandstand, huffed Gordon, and I'm ready to go. I'll be first at the Sodor show.
This made Thomas cross. I'll deliver Sir Topham Hatt's brand new car to the Sodor show before you, Thomas whistled. SKARLOEY storms through. In the summer, the high hills of Sodor are SKARLOEY's favorite place. There are flowers and forests and fields full of sheep and farmers who wave as SKARLOEY chuffs by. But in the winter, it's very different in the hills. There is rain and wind, and sometimes there are bad storms. One rainy day, SKARLOEY was delivering cars of slate. He saw a farmer up ahead by the tracks. "There's an emergency," he shouted. "A big storm is coming. We have to get the sheep down from the hills. We need the engines to help." SKARLOEY wanted to help, so he puffed quickly away to the depot. He had to tell the other engines that there was an emergency. When SKARLOEY arrived at the depot, his friends Rheneas and Peter Sam were there. So was Mr. Percival. SKARLOEY told him about the storm.
First, said Mr. Percival, you must collect the freight cars and take them to the top of the hill. Then, pick up the sheep and bring them safely down the hill to the farmers. Yes, sir, peeped Rheneas and Peter Sam.
Duncan does it all. Duncan is a very lively engine. He likes to do important jobs, and he always likes to be busy. One afternoon, Duncan arrived at the wharf. He had to collect freight cars of straw. "More loads of straw," he wished. Duncan was fed up. "What's the matter?" tooted Thomas. "I've been doing the same job all day long," grumbled Duncan, "collecting silly straw and taking it up to the farms in the hills. I want to do something more exciting." Just then, Rusty puffed in with freight cars of slate. He looked tired. "Hello," he wished warily. "I have so many jobs to do today. I'm all puffed out." "What sort of jobs?" asked Duncan. "Well, next I have to pick up some sightseers and show them the ruined castle," chuffed Rusty. "Oh, that sounds more exciting than delivering straw," Duncan tooted. I'll take your passengers for you. All right, Rusty whistled. But only if you have time and can do a good job. I have plenty of time, snorted Duncan. This is an exciting job. Sir Handel in charge. Sir Handel is one of the oldest engines in the hills of Sodor. He knows a lot of things, and sometimes he can be rather grand. He enjoys telling other engines what to do, and because he is a wise engine, the other engines do as he tells them. One morning, Sir Handel puffed into the transfer yards. James was waiting.
I have to take Mr. Percival to a meeting with Sir Topham Hatt,
snorted James. Just then, Mr. Percival arrived. He was late.
Sir Handel, gasped Mr. Percival. There's an important special today. I'd like you to be in charge of it while I'm away.
Yes, sir, shuffled Sir Handel happily. He liked the idea of being in charge. Now he could tell the other engines what to do. Thomas and the Billboard. Knapford is the biggest station on the island of Sodor. All the engines love its bustling busyness. Today was a very special day. It was Knapford Station's birthday, and there was going to be a grand party. All the engines were very excited. They were to have their photograph taken. The photograph was going to be put up at Knapford on a billboard. Thomas felt very proud. I've never been on a billboard before. But the photographer was having trouble fitting all the engines into the photograph. Hey, move it back a there, James. And you forward, Percy. That's good. And a Diesel, can you move in? Diesel moved in. The camera flashed. Thomas didn't know that Diesel had rolled right in front of him. And neither did Diesel. Thomas puffed into Marin Station to pick up the new billboard. He was very excited. But when Thomas saw it, he was very disappointed. Diesel's right in front of me, Thomas thought sadly. No one can see me at all. Rosie's Carnival Special. Rosie is a lively little tank engine. She's very quick. She also likes to be very busy. Any job is a good job for Rosie. One day, Rosie and Emily were at Knapford Station. Sir Topham Hatt had some important news.
The carnival train is waiting at Brendam Docks.
Rosie was excited. She hoped Sir Topham Hatt would ask her to pull the carnival special.
Emily, you must pull the carnival special.
Rosie was disappointed.
Rosie, you must be Emily's back engine.
Rosie didn't want to be the back engine. She wanted to pull the carnival special on her own. I have a lot to do today. After we pull the carnival special, I have to collect the milk from High Farm. Rosie puffed sadly along. She wished she could pull a special on her own. Then Rosie had an idea. If she arrived at the docks before Emily, she could take the carnival special. Then Emily could puff straight to Hill Farm. That would really help Emily. So Rosie raced off as fast as her pistons would pump. Excellent Emily. It was autumn on the island of Sodor. There had been a terrible storm. Lots of tracks were blocked. And lots of engines had broken down. But Emily made it to Brendam Docks with her load.
Well done. You're the only engine to arrive on time. You are excellent, Emily.
That made Emily very proud. Excellent Emily, she thought. I like that.
Sir Topham Hatt had a very important job for Emily. Jeremy cannot land at the airport, and my mother is on board. The storm has blown some metal tanks across the runway. You must collect Trevor from Farmer McColl's. Take him to the airport so that he can clear the runway. Then Jeremy can land.
Oh, yes, sir. Excellent Emily can do it. Then Murdoch puffed alongside Emily. I'm going to Farmer McColl's too. Lots of lines are flooded. Take the Wellsworth track. I'm not going on that track. It's much quicker to go through the forest. I'm Excellent Emily. I can make it through. James works it out. James is a bright red engine. He always likes to look his best. To do his best. And to show the other engines he knows best too. It was winter on the island of Sodor. Thomas, Stanley, and James were working at the yards. They were shunting trains to take to Great Waterton. They had to arrive on time. Stanley watched James shunting his freight cars. They wiggled and giggled. James quickly biffed and bashed his cars into line.
You're the best biffer I've ever seen.
Oh, that was nothing. See how easily I can shunt heavy Hector. James collected Hector. Stanley watched as James shunted Hector to the back of his train. Snow started to fall. I'm ready to leave. I'll see you both at Great Waterton. It's starting to snow, James. You should check the weather with the yard manager. James didn't want to be told what to do by a freight car, especially in front of Thomas and Stanley. I'll decide what we do. The weather doesn't bother me. Gordon takes a shortcut. Gordon is a very proud engine. He likes to do important jobs. Gordon thinks he knows the Sodor Railway better than anyone. Gordon was at Knapford Station, waiting for Stanley. Stanley was late. Gordon had to take Stanley's passengers on to Brendam Docks. At last, Stanley puffed in. Oh, I'm sorry I'm late. I took a shortcut, but I got lost.
Huh. I never get lost. I know the railway better than any other engine. Some very important passengers and a group of workmen are waiting at Great Waterton. The first engine to arrive will pick up the very important passengers. The second will collect the workmen. Gordon didn't want to pick up the workmen. He wanted to pick up the very important passengers. I need to get cold in water. See you at Great Waterton, Gordon. And Stanley chuffed cheerily away. Gordon was determined to arrive at Great Waterton first, so he raced off to Brendam Docks. Gordon delivered Stanley's passengers and puffed away to Great Waterton as quickly as his boiler could bubble. The Man in the Hills. Thomas puffs proudly all over the island of Sodor. He is especially happy to visit his friends on the narrow gauge railway. There is always something special to do or to see in the high hills. One day, Thomas puffed into the wharf. Lots of his friends were there. Hello! It was the narrow gauge controller's birthday. The little engines had a lot to do before they could go to his party. Thomas was excited. I've brought a present from Sir Topham Hatt. It's a special tent to have the birthday party in. We have special presents too. I'm taking decorations. And I'm taking flowers. We're taking banners. And balloons. They were all very excited.
I'm going to tell him a Man in the Hills story. They are his favorites.
Thomas had never heard of the Man in the Hills.
He was a very tall man, dressed all in white. He lived high in the hills, No one has ever found him.
An idea flew into Thomas's funnel. Maybe I can find him and bring him to Mr. Percival's party. That would be the most special present of all.
I can help you. I know the hills better than anyone.
No, thank you. I'm sure I can find him on my own. Push me, pull you. One bright spring morning at the coal yard, the yard manager was talking to SKARLOEY.
A puppet show is coming. The children will be excited. No one in the hills has ever seen a puppet show.
SKARLOEY wanted to pull the puppet show special, so he raced away. SKARLOEY puffed into the transfer yards. Thomas and the narrow gauge controller were already there.
Please, sir, may I pull the puppet show special?
That's a fine idea, SKARLOEY. SKARLOEY's boiler bubbled with excitement. Watch out, they're heavy. SKARLOEY buffered up. Slowly, SKARLOEY puffed away. The cars were heavy. But SKARLOEY was happy. The puppet show special was his. SKARLOEY heaved and hauled up the steep hill. At last he reached the top. Rheneas was there. He was very excited to see the puppet show special. Best friends. Thomas and Percy are best friends. They tell each other everything. They even have a best friend's whistle. It was a busy day at the quarry. Thomas and Percy were working together. Together, Thomas and Percy happily tooted their best friend's whistle. My favorite days are when we work together. Then, Neville arrived to collect some freight cars. He was excited. The brass band is arriving at Brendam Docks. Hooray! I like the brass band. So do I, but I'm never asked to pull them. If you go to the washdown now, you'll soon be as shiny as a trumpet. Then maybe Sir Topham Hatt will ask you to collect them. Percy was excited. Thank you, Thomas. The two engines tooted their best friend's whistle, and Percy puffed happily away. Later, Sir Topham Hatt arrived. He was in a hurry.
Thomas, you are to pick up the brass band from the docks. And don't forget to have a washdown, thank you.
Thomas was worried. He knew Percy wanted to pick up the brass band, but he didn't know how to tell Percy that Sir Topham Hatt had asked him to do it. Percy was waiting for the band. You are my best friend, Percy. From now on, I will always tell you everything. And they tooted their best friend's whistle for everyone to hear.